What if? What if you find yourself in a place that you don't know? Will you be okay? Is it safe to travel solo? Will I be able to find my way in places I've never been? Will I enjoy it? There are so many questions about full-time travel and what ifs that get imagined and scenarios that I wanted to today spend some time showing you some of the cool outcomes of what if you do start traveling full-time. So let's jump in. Welcome to the How to Travel Full-Time podcast. I'm your host, Heather Markel. If you're dreaming of full-time travel or moving abroad, but stuck at the emotional, financial, and logistical challenges, this podcast is for you. I'll help you trade overwhelm for information that gets you from down and stuck to up and going. You can dream about the travel lifestyle, or you can live the travel lifestyle. If you're ready to live it, then let's jump in together. There are so many questions we can ask about when we change our life, right? When we have this desire to travel full time, but we realize there's so much we don't know. And obviously, first there's the logistics about making it happen, there's affording it. But at some point, you are going to think forward into, wow, once I'm out there doing it, what might happen to me? What situations might I find myself in? Will I be okay? And I hear this from a lot of people who are would-be future full-time travelers. So I wanted to explore a little bit the sort of, I think some really cool stuff happens when you have the courage to go out there. And I wanted to counter some of the what ifs with some stories. And I may do a few episodes around this. But for today's episode, let me tell you about a couple what ifs that I did not intend, I never imagined finding myself in. So the first one is in 2019, I went to South Africa for the first time, had an amazing time, and I took a train from Johannesburg to Cape Town. And I had probably every scenario happen. So I'm thinking, hopefully will I be safe? It's, I'm going from Johannesburg. It was fine. And then I was supposed to meet a friend in Cape Town who was going to pick me up at the train station. I think I was supposed to get in at maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So she was going to pick me up and take her back to her house, had it all planned. And yes, delays happen, but wow, this train ride was something else. I think we had a slight breakdown on the tracks at some point. So that slowed us down. And then later on in the journey, we were stopped because we were informed someone had stolen some of the track, the actual metal track off of the train track, because apparently you can sell that and it gets you money. So they actually had to rebuild the track for the trains. So we couldn't go anywhere. And they pulled in buses at one point, but there weren't enough buses for everybody. And because the delay ended up being much larger than it should have been, we got into a problem with having enough food for everyone. And I learned that typically there's more than enough. And so the workers on the train would be able to take some home. And they were upset that now the passengers were going to have to eat the food. So it was really a cultural experience that I just didn't expect, but it was very robust. I mean, who would have thought that just in a simple sounding train ride, I would have learned so much about deeper parts of travel in Africa. So the thing that happened, though, that I was alone. I was traveling by myself, and the announcements, by the way, were in Afrikaans, so I didn't quite understand what they were saying. So the weirdest thing happened. At some point, there were, I think, the couple next to me they were sleeper cars we were in, and there was a couple in the car, one down from me, I believe. And there was a lot of fighting going on. I think the husband got drunk. It was kind of scary. And somehow this other couple took me under their wing. We just got chatting, and they're South African. They're just the loveliest people that just showed up and decided to look after me. They translated all of the announcements for me. This is how I know everything that I just previously told you. They spent time with me. And when we arrived in Cape Town, it was about 2 a.m. Instead of 3 p.m, we arrived later that night at 2 a.m. Now, if you've never been to Cape Town, it is reputed as one of the most dangerous cities in the world. You do not go out in Cape Town at 2 a.m. You just don't. So that meant we had to sleep in the train, or we were given the option to sleep in the train until the conductor came by at like 6 a.m. Now, this couple that took me in was going to their home in Cape Town. Instead of leaving at 2 a.m., which they could have done, they chose to stay in the train with me to make sure that I was okay. And then when we were woken up at 6 a.m, they escorted me to a taxi. So I found this time and time again in my travels. There are moments that could be kind of scary. That could be like, I don't know what's happening here. Maybe I don't understand the language. Maybe it's a scenario I never envisioned myself in. And there are always two people that come to my rescue. And it's happened enough times now that I feel like I can be comfortable and I don't have to freak out, because either I'm going to find those people, or I also know that I'm smart, I'm resourceful, and I know from my experiences that I can tap into that resourcefulness to find my way out of the situation. So that's one story to hopefully counter some of the what ifs, because sometimes people help you and things happen in unexpected ways, which is really beautiful. Now, a second story was in February of 2020. I flew to New Zealand, and I had planned to stay for 2 or 3 weeks and then pop over to Sydney to see a great friend there. And as you probably know, this is when COVID was in China. It was a China problem. And when I changed planes in either Los Angeles or Sydney, I don't remember which, I was asked if I had been to China recently, which I had not. So I got on the plane, everything's fine. So I get to New Zealand, and the thing is, what I knew is when I arrived, I found the accommodation was so expensive, I wasn't sure how I was going to even last there for 2 or 3 weeks. And part of this is because, of course, New Zealand is a small country. There's a limited amount of accommodation, and a lot of people love New Zealand. So my first night, I had booked an Airbnb for 2 nights, and then I figured I'd figure it out. And so the first night, I drop my bags off at the Airbnb, and then I go to a pub down the road. And while I'm enjoying my meal, there's a table next to me with a woman and a few guys, and they capture my ear when they start talking about dating or something. And so me being me, I just butt into the conversation. I said, "Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry to butt in, but I had to when you said, whatever it was." And the woman looks at me and she says, "Are you by yourself?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You can't be by yourself. Come join us." So I was invited to join them. And by the way, that happens a lot too as a solo traveler. And so if you're worried about being alone, you're actually often not. And so I joined their table. We had a great chat. I got to know Deborah and her friends. And by the end of the meal, I had an invitation to stay at Deborah's house. So I took her up on that. I stayed with her for about a week. And I think I did like 3 days and then went off somewhere and then came back. But, wow. So there I was sitting in my seat thinking, where am I going to stay? Where am I going to stay? What am I going to do? And here she is, right? So if you ever think about manifesting, and I remember in my corporate life, I just never saw the manifesting happen. I'd think a thought, but months later, I'd be like, well, that never happened. That never, and then when I travel, it's sort of instant and it's sometimes a little scary. So she took care of me. And then I think about 2 weeks later, we start learning that COVID is more serious than we thought. So I learned by this time that the north of the North Island was reputed to be a little bit less touristy. So I thought maybe it'd be less expensive as well. And so I found my way to Kirikiri, which is near Paihia in the north of the North Island. And indeed, the lodging was much less expensive. And so my plan was I would stay there for a week and let this COVID thing blow over, and then I would move along. Well, you know what happens. So here I am in Kirikiri. I've booked this Airbnb for a week, and I'm suddenly faced with a choice. Do I fly home or do I stay in New Zealand? And the scenario was, so to get to New Zealand on this trip, I had spent 26 US dollars and 40,000 points to get there, right? So $26. The return flight, they told me, was $5,000. So I was a little overwhelmed. And they also said if I didn't leave immediately, they weren't sure when I would be able to leave. So I wrestled with this. I called my mom. I ultimately, went back and forth. I asked the universe for a sign. And later that day or that evening, there was a praying mantis on the glass door of my room at the Airbnb. And there was just something about it. I just felt like, okay, it just stayed on the window. So I thought, okay, there's my sign to stay in New Zealand, which is what I chose to do. But the thing is, the Airbnb had a new booking and I had to leave a couple days later, and I had no idea where I was going to stay. So here I am again. Where am I going to stay? So I go out for a walk and I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't know where I'm going to stay. What am I going to do? And I'm kind of cycling through these thoughts. And I think, let me just take a walk, clear my head. So I walk down the road and I find myself, I see this sign for a sculpture garden. Wow, that sounds interesting. So I walk into this place and I get to the door of the garden and there's a little sign made, like printed on some paper with, there's a picture of a man's head with a hat and some text, and it says that the garden is not mowed or cured, like they don't clip it and maintain it. They want nature to just be nature. And so, they warn you about this. I think, okay, well, I'll go in. So I go in. I'm wandering around this garden. It is beautiful. It's so beautiful. And it's such a reprieve from the stress that I'm feeling about where am I going to stay. And at some point in this garden, I see a man. And I look up at his face, and it's the face of the man that I've seen on the paper that was on the door to the garden. So I say, excuse me, hey, aren't you the guy that was on the picture? He says, indeed I am. And the first question he asks me, and which really still gives me chills, he says, you aren't by chance looking for accommodations, are you? And I was like, when this happens, that I'm like stuck in a thought and I'm freaking out, and then the answer appears, it still takes me, it's a little chilling, right? And it's great in a good way, but it's, I have like goosebumps as I think about it. So Robin, the man, it turns out this garden that I'm walking through is part of a larger property that is managed by his daughter, and there are 6 cottages, and only 2 of them are full, and I should talk to his daughter about whether I could stay in a cottage. And within like 20 minutes, I have myself not just a cottage at a reduced rate, which was reduced further because I exchanged some work in exchange for a lower rate, but I got to be surrounded by other people marooned in New Zealand. So there was an American couple in one cottage and a British couple in the other cottage. And so instead of, when we went into lockdown and we had to do these 2-foot kind of bubbles, we used to have Monday night drinks. We put our names on a chair. They were stacked 2 feet apart, and we'd at least have some socialization while all of this is going on. So I can't think of a luckier or better scenario to have ended up with at that time. So I tell you these stories in the hopes that they give you some inspiration. And so if you are someone that wants to travel full time and you are stuck in those what if questions and you're picturing negative outcomes, consider shifting that into what marvelous things might happen if I start traveling full time. And those are just a couple of examples, right? Because, if I hadn't have had the courage to start traveling full time, well, I could have been stuck in many other places, but I was in a place where there was virtually no COVID for a year and got to live my life very differently than other people in larger cities and bigger countries. So there's a lot of wonderful things that can happen if you do travel full time. So I hope that gives you some inspiration. And if you've heard this and you're thinking, gosh, yes, I would love to get started, but I'm not sure where I need to start, go ahead and take my free quiz. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes below. And it's a real quick quiz, and it will give you an understanding of where, based on the answers that you plug in, what the right starting point is for you, and it'll give you some guidance. So I hope you found this episode helpful, and I hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to the How to Travel Full-Time podcast. If you loved it, please leave a review and let us know. Make sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes. Check out the show notes for important resources related to this episode, and come visit us at travellifestylecoach.com to learn more great information. If you're ready to get started with the lifestyle, go to moneyfortravelbootcamp.com, where you can learn all the strategies to afford this amazing lifestyle. Talk to you next week.